Effective immediately. You're redundant, my department head announced, sliding a thin envelope toward me across the conference table. 8 pairs of eyes avoided mine. The visiting VP from the acquiring company stared at her tablet, suddenly fascinated by whatever was on the screen. I sat motionless, my half-finished presentation notes scattered before me. The projector still displayed my market growth statistics, 183% increase over 3 years. My voice had been mid-sentence when Diane interrupted. The position overlap makes this necessary, she continued, her tone businesslike. You'll find the severance details adequate. The oxygen seemed to vanish from the room. 8 years. 8 years building our international markets from nothing. From zero presence to 43 countries. From desperate cold calls to relationship-based partnerships worth millions. And this was my dismissal. An afterthought in a merger planning meeting I wasn't even supposed to attend. I'd only learned about this meeting 15 minutes ago when Trey from IT texted me. Weird they didn't invite you to the Kingswood merger prep. Whole international teams there. So I'd walked in, apologized for being late, and begun presenting the quarterly numbers. No one had stopped me, until now. I don't understand, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My division exceeded targets by 27% last quarter alone. Diane smiled thinly. It's not about performance. Kingswood already has a robust international division. We can't justify duplicate roles. I noticed her choice of words. Not, we can't justify your role. Just, duplicate roles. As if I were interchangeable. A redundancy, not the architect of everything they were acquiring. I stood up calmly and said, interesting. Then I pulled out my phone. For 3 years, I'd been systematically erased from my own achievements. My name disappeared from proposals I'd written. My strategies became team initiatives. When industry awards came, my contributions vanished from submissions. When major clients visited, I'd suddenly find myself assigned to urgent matters elsewhere. I dialed the first number. It's happening, I said simply, then hung up. Diane gestured impatiently. Clear out your desk, bye. I raised my hand, already making my second call. Sir, yes, I'm in the meeting now. Exactly as we anticipated. I listened briefly. Understood. Completely. The tension thickened as I made my third call, switching to Mandarin. I spoke decisively, mentioning specific figures before ending the conversation with a single nod. The visiting VP, Wilson, cleared his throat. Who exactly were you speaking with? My first call was to the Industry Regulatory Commission investigating your acquisition practices, I replied. The second was to our board chairman, who tasked me 6 months ago with assessing this merger's viability. The third was to our largest overseas distributor, who just canceled their 5-year contract renewal. Wilson's expression shifted. Wait, you're the one who built relationships with every major client in our international division? Yes. The same person who structured distribution agreements with protection clauses that activate upon my involuntary departure? Also, yes. Diane's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Those clients don't trust corporate structures, I continued. They trust me. Those clauses were their requirement for signing. This situation can be salvaged, Wilson insisted, exchanging glances with his team. It could have been, I agreed. Before this ambush, I planned to support this merger. I had arranged discussions with reluctant partners to address their concerns. I gathered my belongings. Those discussions are now canceled. I walked out, back straight, eyes forward. Only when the elevator doors closed did I allow myself to shake. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this wild ride so far, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling me what you think Diane deserves after that cold-blooded move. Now, let's get back to how this all unfolded. My name is Naima Joshi, and until 20 minutes ago, I was the Senior International Markets Director at Blue Lake Technologies. I wasn't always this calm under pressure. Growing up as the quietest of 4 siblings in a tiny apartment, I learned to speak only when I had something valuable to say. This made me an excellent listener, a skill that would later build me an empire of international clients who felt truly heard. I joined Blue Lake 8 years ago when they were struggling to expand beyond domestic markets. I was 27, armed with fluency in 4 languages, and a network of connections from my previous job at a trade commission. I didn't have the fancy MBA that most of my colleagues flaunted, but I understood something they didn't. International business runs on relationships, not just numbers. My first year, I worked 80-hour weeks, making calls at odd hours to accommodate time zones. I ate lunch at my desk while researching cultural protocols. I tracked down potential partners through industry forums, alumni networks, and trade shows. Sometimes I'd get one meeting after months of persistence, but I never wasted an opportunity. Diane joined Blue Lake 6 years ago, hired directly as head of global strategy despite having zero international experience. The rumor was she'd impressed our CEO, Gregory, with her aggressive acquisition strategy at her previous company. From our first meeting, she made it clear she viewed me as a tactical executor, not a strategic partner. "You handle the details, Naima," she'd say. "I'll worry about the big picture." But the details I handled included negotiating our first major distribution deal in Singapore, creating our localization strategy for the Middle Eastern market, and personally convincing the notoriously difficult Taiwanese manufacturing giant TYL to choose us over our competitors. For 3 years, I accepted my role in the shadows. I told myself I was being a team player, that results mattered more than recognition, that Diane's political maneuvering was just corporate reality. Everything changed during the Beijing conference. I'd spent months arranging meetings with 5 potential Chinese partners, companies that typically refused to even consider Western vendors. After 2 days of negotiations, we secured preliminary agreements with all 5. It was the breakthrough we'd been working toward for years. That night, I fell ill with food poisoning. While I was in my hotel room, barely able to stand, Diane hosted a celebration dinner with our new partners and the visiting executives from headquarters. The next day, she sent a company-wide email announcing her team's success. The attached photos showed her toasting with our new Chinese partners, Gregory beaming beside her. Not a single mention of my name. When I confronted her, she smiled with practiced sympathy. "Naima, you need to understand how this works. I shield you from politics, so you can focus on what you do best. Besides, you weren't even at the dinner, because I was sick from working around the clock to make those deals happen." She sighed as if I were being childish. "This is executive-level business. Sometimes we simplify narratives for clarity. The board doesn't need to know every person who contributed." That night, something hardened inside me. I realized Diane wasn't just taking credit, she was systematically erasing me. Each success I created was absorbed into her narrative. Each relationship I built became hers in official communications. She wasn't just my boss, she was my parasite. I began keeping detailed records. Every email, every call transcript, every contract negotiation. I recorded meetings on my personal device. I built my own relationships with board members, casually mentioning projects I was helping Diane with. I made myself indispensable to our biggest clients, ensuring they asked for me by name. When rumors of the Kingswood acquisition started, I knew my position would be vulnerable. Kingswood had their own international division. On paper, our roles would overlap, but I also knew something Diane didn't. Kingswood's international growth had stalled. Their approach was outdated, relationship poor, and over-reliant on price cutting. 3 months ago, I received an unexpected call from Chairman Baldwin. "Naima," he said, "I've been hearing your name from our partners in Asia for years. Gregory says you're the quiet engine behind our international success." I nearly dropped the phone. Gregory had never given me any indication he even knew what I did. "I need someone I can trust to quietly assess this Kingswood situation," Baldwin continued. "Their international numbers look good on paper, but something doesn't add up. Can you look into it without tipping off Diane? We need objective analysis, not departmental politics." That conversation changed everything. For the first time, I realized I had allies I didn't know existed, people who had seen my work all along. Despite Diane's efforts to minimize me, my investigation uncovered serious problems in Kingswood's international operation. Their client relationships were superficial. Their contracts were under-delivering. Their regional heads were planning exits. Their headline numbers looked impressive because they were drastically underpricing to buy market share, a strategy that was becoming unsustainable. I compiled my findings and presented them to Baldwin and 2 other board members. They were concerned, but still believed the domestic synergies justified the merger. "Just help us manage the international transition," Baldwin said. "We'll need you to steady the ship after the merger." I nodded but felt a chill. Diane hadn't been in that meeting. She didn't know about my investigation or my standing with the board, and if she was choosing which international staff to retain. The night before the merger meeting, I received a text from an unknown number. "Watch your back tomorrow. Dee has been meeting privately with Kay's team. Your name came up. Not good." I couldn't sleep. By morning, I had developed a contingency plan, one I hoped I wouldn't need to use. I'd worked too hard, built too much to lose it all to Diane's machinations. And then I walked into that meeting room and saw the faces, saw the envelope, heard those words. Effective immediately, you're redundant. Now, sitting in my car in the parking garage, I stared at my phone. The 3 calls I'd made in the conference room had been real, but not what I'd described. The first was to my best friend Kira, the second to my voicemail. The third was indeed in Mandarin, but to my favorite takeout place. The real plan would take longer than a phone call, and it would cost Diane far more than she could imagine. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, cycling through rage, grief, and disbelief. Rain began to tap against the windshield, matching the drumming of my fingers on the steering wheel. 8 years of my life, countless missed dinners with friends, relationships that withered while I built Blue Lake's international presence. All of it snatched away in a 30-second announcement. My phone buzzed, a text from Kira. What happened? I'll explain later, I replied. Need legal advice. Your cousin's still practicing employment law? I started the car and drove, not toward home, but to a small cafe 20 minutes away. I needed neutral ground to think clearly. As I waited for my tea, I drafted an email to Baldwin, factual and unemotional. Chairman Baldwin, I regret to inform you that I've been terminated effective immediately. Given our recent discussions about my role post-merger, I wanted to make you aware directly. I remain committed to the company's success and am available to discuss this unexpected development. Respectfully, Naima Joshi. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Private number. Naima, it's Baldwin. Where are you right now? I told him. Stay there, I'm 20 minutes away. While waiting, I received messages from 3 colleagues who'd been in the meeting room. Each expressed shock and confusion. Trey from IT wrote, everyone's talking. Nobody understands what just happened. Diane's locked in her office with Wilson. When Baldwin walked in, I barely recognized him. The usually polished chairman looked disheveled. His tie loosened. This wasn't authorized, he said immediately, sitting down. Diane didn't have approval for any terminations. This merger isn't even finalized. She seemed quite certain about my redundancy. Baldwin rubbed his temples. Wilson's been pushing to bring in his own international team. Diane probably saw an opportunity to eliminate a threat and curry favor simultaneously. A threat. So Baldwin understood more than I'd realized. The board meeting is tomorrow, he continued. I want you there. Don't clean out your desk. Don't sign anything. This isn't over. After he left, I drove home in a daze. My apartment felt alien after so many months of 18-hour workdays. Dust had settled on picture frames. Plants had withered. Mail had piled up. I opened my laptop and began pulling files I'd stored in private cloud accounts. Copies of every strategy I'd developed, every contract I'd negotiated, every email chain that proved my contributions. 3 years of methodical documentation. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Is this Naima Joshi? A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Yes, who's calling? Samantha Reyes, Kingswood's VP of Talent Integration. I heard about today's incident. Wilson asked me to reach out. We're very interested in speaking with you directly. Interesting. So, Wilson was already distancing himself from Diane's decision. I appreciate the call, Miss Reyes, but I'll need to understand exactly what happened today before considering any conversations. Of course. To be clear, Kingswood never endorsed individual terminations at this stage. We're evaluating all talent. Your international growth numbers are exceptional. I thanked her politely and ended the call, then immediately received a text from a Blue Lake number I didn't recognize. This is Gregory's assistant. He requests a private meeting tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. at the Riverside Cafe. Come alone. The CEO wanted a secret meeting? This was getting more interesting by the minute. I barely slept that night, rehearsing scenarios and planning responses. By morning, I'd settled on my approach. I would listen more than speak. I would reveal nothing about Baldwin's support. I would be the calm, competent professional I'd always been, while gathering every scrap of information I could. The Riverside Cafe was empty except for Gregory, who sat at a corner table nursing a coffee. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper. Naima, he nodded as I sat down. Thank you for coming. Hard to refuse a summons from the CEO. He winced slightly. Not a summons. A request from someone who owes you an apology. That caught me off guard. In 8 years, I'd never had a direct conversation with Gregory outside of large group settings. Diane acted without authorization yesterday, he continued. She'll face consequences for that. But I need to know exactly what happened in that room after she gave you the envelope. Wilson called me immediately afterward, extremely agitated about phone calls you made. I kept my face neutral. I was shocked and upset. I called a friend, left myself a reminder voicemail, and ordered lunch. People do strange things when blindsided. But you implied those calls were to regulatory authorities and clients. Wilson thinks you were bluffing, but he's worried enough that he's demanding we delay the board vote. I took a slow sip of water. Interesting that he believed me so easily. Gregory's eyes narrowed. Were you bluffing? I leaned forward. Gregory, for 8 years, I've built relationships across 43 countries. I've created distribution networks from nothing. I've negotiated contracts that protected Blue Lake's interests while making partners feel valued. And in all that time, you and I have never had a real conversation about my work. So forgive me if I'm not eager to reveal my hand now. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. I underestimated you. Many of us did. That's becoming very clear. He pushed a folder across the table. The board meeting is at 2 p.m. Your temporary badge is in here. Use the executive elevator. After he left, I opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet with bullet points labeled Merger Concerns, International Division. Every point was taken directly from my confidential report to Baldwin. The report Diane knew nothing about. My phone buzzed with a text from Kira. Cousin can see you at 11. Bringing someone you should meet. At 11 a.m., I sat in the office of Kira's cousin Adrian, a sharp-eyed employment attorney who listened without interruption as I explained the situation. They've created a legal minefield for themselves, he said when I finished. Termination during a merger review period, targeting the person who built the division being acquired, no performance issues, no proper notice, multiple procedural violations. The other person Kira had mentioned, a silver-haired woman named Regina, nodded along. I've seen this scenario before. The acquiring company's real target is the client relationships you've built. They want those assets without the person who created them. Who are you exactly? I asked. Regina smiled. I investigate corporate governance issues for institutional investors. Your friend thought I might find your situation interesting. She was right. So what do I do now? I asked. Adrian leaned forward. First, you don't sign anything. Second, you attend that board meeting and speak only facts. No accusations, no emotions. Third, you let us handle the legal response if necessary. Regina added, and you decide what outcome you actually want. Reinstatement? Compensation? Something else entirely? Something else entirely. The phrase echoed in my mind as I drove to the office. What did I want? Not just my job back. Not even Diane's removal. I wanted recognition. I wanted the truth acknowledged. I wanted 8 years of erased contributions restored to the record. I wanted justice. The Blue Lake headquarters looked different as I approached it, knowing I might never work there again. The security guard did a double take at my temporary executive badge but waved me through. In the elevator, I checked my phone one last time. 3 new messages. From Baldwin. Boardroom changed to 10th floor. Diane and Wilson already here. Stay calm. From Trey. System showing your access revoked, then reinstated with exec privileges. What's happening? From an unknown number. This is Martin from TYL Taiwan. Heard rumors about changes at Blue Lake. Our contract renewal depends on your involvement. Call me. Martin's message was exactly the leverage I might need. TYL was our biggest manufacturing partner. Their contract renewal represented nearly 30% of our international revenue. As the elevator doors opened on the 10th floor, I took a deep breath and squared my shoulders. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see a tense gathering, board members on one side, Diane and the Kingswood team on the other. Baldwin stood at the head of the table, mid-sentence. The room fell silent as I entered. Diane's face froze in shock, then twisted with anger. She leaned to whisper something to Wilson, who shook his head sharply. Miss Joshi, Baldwin gestured to an empty seat. Thank you for joining us. We were just discussing yesterday's irregularities. I nodded politely and sat down, placing my phone and notebook on the table. Thank you for including me, Chairman Baldwin. To be clear, Baldwin continued, this meeting is now addressing 2 issues. The proposed merger itself and the unauthorized termination of a key employee during the review period. Diane interrupted. There was nothing unauthorized about it. We discussed redundant positions weeks ago. We discussed potential organizational changes post-merger. Gregory cut in. No terminations were approved at this stage, especially not of the person who built our entire international presence. Diane's face flushed. That's an exaggeration. I've led the global strategy for 6 years, I finished quietly. While I've been here for 8, the room fell silent again. I rarely interrupted anyone, especially not in meetings, but something had shifted in me. The quiet, accommodating Naima was gone. Perhaps, I continued, we should clarify my actual contributions before discussing whether my position is redundant. Baldwin nodded. Excellent suggestion. He turned to the board members. You've all received copies of Miss Joshi's confidential merger analysis. What you may not know is that she personally established our presence in 43 countries, negotiated our top 20 international contracts, and maintains direct relationships with partners representing 87% of our overseas revenue. I watched the board members exchange glances. Several turned to look at Diane, whose expression had hardened into a mask. That's misleading, she said flatly. International expansion was a team effort under my leadership. Was it? Baldwin slid a folder to each board member. These are the original strategy documents for our Asian expansion. Note the author metadata. As the board members opened the folders, my heart raced. I hadn't provided those documents to Baldwin. Someone else had been gathering evidence too. Wilson cleared his throat. This is all very interesting, but it doesn't change the fundamental compatibility issues between our international divisions. Actually, Gregory interjected, it raises critical questions about what exactly Kingswood is acquiring. If Miss Joshi's contributions have been systematically minimized in official records, but she's actually the architect of our international success, that materially affects valuation. The tension in the room thickened. I could see board members whispering to each other. Diane stared straight ahead, knuckles white where she gripped her pen. My phone lit up with a text. Martin from TYL again. Need confirmation you're staying, or we're exploring other options. Team meeting in 30 minutes. I turned the phone slightly so Baldwin could see it. He nodded almost imperceptibly. I believe, Baldwin said, we should pause this discussion for a brief recess. 30 minutes. He looked directly at me. Miss Joshi, would you mind waiting in my office? There's a private matter we need to discuss. As I stood to leave, Wilson suddenly spoke up. Before we break, Miss Joshi, what exactly did you mean yesterday when you mentioned protection clauses in your distribution agreements? The room stilled, all eyes turning to me. This was it, the moment to play my hand or hold my cards close. Many of our international partners, I said carefully, work with Blue Lake specifically because of relationships I've cultivated over years. Several requested contractual assurances that those relationships would remain intact. What kind of assurances? Wilson pressed. I met his gaze directly. The kind that make any merger very complicated if I'm no longer with the company. As I walked out, I heard the eruption of voices behind me. Questions, accusations, demands for explanations. In Baldwin's office, I stood at the window overlooking the city. 8 years of work had come down to this moment. Whatever happened next would determine not just my future, but Diane's as well. And I was finally ready to emerge from the shadows. Through the glass wall of Baldwin's office, I watched the boardroom erupt into chaos. Wilson was on his feet, hands gesticulating wildly. 2 board members were flipping frantically through the folders. Diane sat motionless, her face ashen. Baldwin's door opened and Gregory stepped in, closing it firmly behind him. You've been planning for this moment, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Those protection clauses, are they real? Every word. I pulled out my tablet and opened a document. This is the standard addendum I included in our last 16 international contracts, specifically requested by the partners themselves. Gregory scanned it, his eyebrows rising. They can terminate with no penalty if you're removed from account management without cause or consultation, and transfer their business to you directly if you leave. They've worked with too many Western companies who built relationships, then swapped in new teams after signing. They wanted insurance against exactly what Diane tried yesterday. Gregory handed the tablet back, his expression unreadable. Why didn't you tell anyone about these clauses? They're all in the final contracts. They've been in our system for years. No one ever asked. I paused. No one ever really looked at what I was doing. A tap at the door interrupted us. Baldwin entered, followed by Wilson. We need to address this immediately, Wilson said. His earlier confidence evaporated. Our shareholders were promised a smooth integration of international operations. If key accounts can terminate, they can, I confirmed. And based on the messages I'm receiving, they're already discussing it. Baldwin sat heavily in his chair. We've got Martin from TYL asking for confirmation you're staying. 2 European distributors have emailed similar concerns. Our Japanese partners are requesting an emergency call. This merger is falling apart before it's even approved, Wilson said, loosening his tie. All because Diane didn't. He stopped himself. Didn't what? I asked quietly. Wilson and Baldwin exchanged glances. Gregory leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Didn't fully disclose the structure of your international relationships. Wilson finished diplomatically. That's not what you were going to say, I pressed. You were going to say she didn't tell you I was the real architect of the international division, that she presented herself as the mastermind, that she deliberately minimized my role to preserve her position in the new structure. The silence confirmed it. We need to stabilize this situation immediately, Baldwin said. Miss Joshi, what would it take to secure your commitment to the merged company? I'd been asking myself the same question all night. Money? A promotion? Diane's removal? None of those answered the deeper injustice of years being erased from my own narrative. I need 3 things, I said finally. First, complete autonomy over international operations post-merger. Second, public acknowledgement of my role building Blue Lake's global presence. Third, I paused. I want a full review of how credit for my work was systematically misattributed for years. The first 2 are easy, Wilson said quickly. The third is complicated. Not really, Gregory interjected. It's a question of corporate integrity. Either we're committed to it or we're not. Baldwin nodded slowly. We'll take your terms to the board. Can you reassure our partners in the meantime? I can tell them I'm in discussions about my role, I said. That's all I can honestly say right now. They accepted this and left, leaving me alone in Baldwin's office. Through the glass, I could see Diane still sitting in the boardroom, now isolated at one end of the table. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. For 3 years, I'd fantasized about this moment, Diane exposed, her deceptions laid bare, but the reality felt hollow. I hadn't wanted destruction. I'd wanted recognition. My phone buzzed with a text from Trey. Diane just got called into Gregory's office. Security standing by. Something big happening. Minutes later, Baldwin returned. The board has unanimously accepted your conditions. They're drawing up an offer letter now, with the title, Executive Vice President of Global Operations. We'd like you to address the international partners immediately. And Diane? Baldwin's expression hardened. She's being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. Her misleading representations about your department have potentially cost us millions in merger value. I see. The words felt inadequate against the magnitude of the moment. There's a press release going out tomorrow clarifying your role in building our international presence. Gregory insisted on it. It was happening so fast. After years of invisibility, I was suddenly the center of attention. The whiplash was disorienting. I need a few minutes, I said. Baldwin nodded understanding. Use my office as long as you need. The board reconvenes in an hour. Alone again, I watched the activity beyond the glass walls. Board members huddled in small groups. The Kingswood team conferred tensely in a corner. Security escorted Diane to her office, presumably to collect her things. The phone on Baldwin's desk rang. I hesitated, then answered. This is Naima. Miss Joshi, a woman's voice, unfamiliar. This is Eliza Morris from the Wall Street Journal. I'm working on a story about the Blue Lake Kingswood merger and understand there have been some unexpected developments. Would you care to comment? My pulse quickened. How had a reporter gotten Baldwin's direct line? Who had tipped her off? I'm not the appropriate person to discuss company matters, I said carefully. Actually, we understand you're central to the current situation. Sources tell us Kingswood is reconsidering the entire acquisition after discovering misrepresentations about Blue Lake's international division leadership. I ended the call without responding and immediately texted Baldwin. WSJ reporter calling your office. Someone's leaking. His reply was immediate. Not from our side. Stay where you are. The next hour passed in a blur of calls and messages. Partners demanding reassurance. Colleagues asking for insider information. Even my mother, who'd seen Blue Lake's stock price dropping and wondered if I was okay. When Baldwin returned, Wilson and Gregory were with him. The situation has escalated, Baldwin said grimly. Someone leaked details to the financial press. The merger is all over social media. Kingswood's stock is down 7% already, on rumors they overlooked critical dependency risks. Wilson looked devastated. Our board is demanding answers. This was supposed to be our flagship acquisition for the year. We need to issue a joint statement immediately, Gregory said. Naima, are you prepared to be named publicly as our international division architect? It was the acknowledgement I'd craved for years, but not like this. Not in a crisis, not as damage control. Yes, I said finally, but I won't disparage Diane publicly. The facts can speak for themselves. They nodded agreement, and we spent the next hour crafting statements for the press, for our partners, for employees. Throughout it all, I maintained a professional demeanor, even as my emotions roiled beneath the surface. The board reconvened as scheduled. I presented a stabilization plan for our international relationships. Everyone treated me with newfound deference, the same people who'd barely acknowledged me for years. As the meeting concluded, a security officer appeared at the door. Mr. Baldwin? We have a situation with Miss Liang. She's refusing to leave the building. Baldwin sighed heavily. I'll handle this. Actually, I said standing, I'd like to speak with her. Baldwin looked surprised but nodded his permission. I found Diane in her office, surrounded by half-packed boxes. When she saw me, her expression hardened. Come to gloat? She asked bitterly. No, I closed the door behind me. I came to understand. Understand what? How you destroyed everything I built. That's exactly what I want to understand, I said quietly. When did you start believing my work was yours? She laughed humorlessly. Is that what you think happened? That I stole your precious ideas? She shook her head. You never understood how this works. Ideas without influence are worthless. Strategies without sponsorship go nowhere. So you were doing me a favor by taking credit? I was doing what executives do, packaging initiatives for senior approval. You think Gregory or the board wanted to hear from a junior manager with no MBA? I gave your work legitimacy. The delusion in her reasoning was staggering. And the systematic erasure of my name from documents, the diverting me from client meetings, that was for my benefit too? Something flickered in her eyes, the first hint of doubt in her righteousness. You built a narrative where you were the hero of Blue Lake's international expansion, I continued. A narrative that required my invisibility, and you maintained it so thoroughly that you believed it yourself. It doesn't matter what I believed, she said, deflating slightly. The board has made their choice. You win. This was never about winning, I said. It was about truth. As I turned to leave, she called after me. The protection clauses. They were brilliant. When did you realize you might need them? I paused at the door. The day you took full credit for the Beijing deals. The day I realized no amount of loyalty or hard work would ever make you acknowledge me. And you waited 3 years to use them? I never wanted to use them at all. You forced my hand yesterday. Her eyes widened with sudden understanding. You had this leverage for 3 years and never used it? You could have exposed me any time. True revenge isn't about destruction, I said. It's about justice. I left her there, surrounded by the remnants of a career built on others' work. The following weeks transformed Blue Lake. The merger was renegotiated on completely different terms, with our international division valued much higher and explicit provisions for retaining key personnel, starting with me. Diane resigned before the investigation concluded. Her departure announcement praised her contributions to domestic strategy, but made no mention of international markets. My appointment as executive vice president was announced simultaneously with a feature in the business press detailing my 8-year journey building Blue Lake's global presence. Former colleagues emerged with stories of how I'd mentored them, solved impossible problems, created opportunities where none existed. 3 months later, I sat in my new corner office, reviewing the quarterly results. Our international division had grown another 15% despite the merger turbulence. The protection clauses were now standard knowledge among the leadership team, a reminder of the power of authentic relationships. My assistant knocked and entered. Wilson's here to see you. He entered, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. The board is thrilled with the integration progress, he said, settling into a chair. You've made this transition remarkably smooth. The relationships were always solid, I replied. They just needed reassurance that nothing fundamental would change. Wilson nodded thoughtfully. I've been meaning to ask, how did you know to prepare those protection clauses years ago? Most people wouldn't have had that foresight. I smiled. I didn't prepare for betrayal. Our partners requested those provisions because they trusted me personally. I simply honored their wishes, and in doing so, created the perfect safety net. He shook his head admiringly. Diane never saw it coming. Diane saw what she wanted to see, I corrected. We all do sometimes. After Wilson left, I walked to the window and looked out at the city below. My phone buzzed with a text from Kira. Dinner tonight to celebrate your magazine cover? I smiled. The profile in International Business Monthly had been unexpected. The Invisible Architect. How Naima Joshi built a global empire from the shadows. Absolutely, I texted back. I've been invisible long enough. If this story resonated with you about standing up for yourself and finally getting the recognition you deserve, hit that like button and subscribe. Have you ever had someone take credit for your work? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about patience, documentation, and playing the long game, tag them or share this video. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't burning bridges. It's building something better on the other side. See you in the next video.